The UN estimates that there are currently about 1 billion people in the world who are living with a disability. So that means that if we were to stand side by side, then people living with a disability would go around the world at least 5 times. Now think about the last news report you either saw, read, or heard. Did it have captions? Could it be understood without sight? Did the story speak beyond people living with disabilities to ethnic minorities? Did it have representation of rural populations, LGBTQ+ individuals, or people from lower socioeconomic groups? Now, when journalism continuously excludes these people, then it starts to feel like a feature, not a bug. And that's why we're here this afternoon, to figure out who gets to be heard, whose story gets to be told, and by who. My name is Edith Kimani. I'll be leading that session, and I have the great pleasure of having with me some 3 wonderful individuals, starting with, if they could please join me on stage, Ragamalika Karthikeyan. I hope I said your name right. She's a co-founder of InQlusive Newsrooms. Ragamalika has been working to make newsrooms safer and more inclusive for LGBTQ+ populations. Thank you for joining us. We also have the pleasure of having Claire Gorman here. She's the head of ABC International at the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, where she leads international broadcasting efforts and also championing projects that ensure content reaches diverse audiences. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have a comedian on stage. I hope to laugh today. He's also an actor and a presenter. Aurel Mertz is a satirical comedian. He works to engage young and diverse audiences here in Germany. Thank you for joining us. So, Claire, I have sometimes a tendency to ask stupid questions, and I think you're the one who has an answer for me. Why are we here right now talking about inclusion in journalism in 2025?
Well, that's a really good way to start, I think, Edith. I think we're all very aware of what's happened in the US, one of the most powerful countries in the world, and what's happening in some, and has been happening in Russia, for example, where diversity and inclusion as concepts and philosophies have really been, attacked. And I think we all know, if we're living in a world in which traditional media and other forms of media as well, we're experiencing declining reach and fragmentation, reaching all audiences is absolutely vital for our survival. Yeah.
And when we say all audiences, how do you define inclusion? Is it the people working in the newsroom? Is it the people we're broadcasting to? What does that mean for you?
It means all of those things. It's the people who are working in the newsroom, the people who are in the administration of the organisation. It's about the people who are on air or who are in the social video, the people who are the voices. So it needs to be that concept of diversity needs to be built into all levels of your operation.
Yeah, in building inclusion, as it were. So, Raga, it surprises me that the Reuters Institute in 2023 found that marginalized groups, such as the one I described earlier, often distrust mainstream media because they feel underrepresented or misrepresented. Is this what you felt leading you to take the steps that you did for inclusion?
Yes, I mean, as a journalist, I'm a journalist and I'm a queer person. I've been a journalist longer than I've been out as a queer person. And I've been in newsrooms where, on air, they'd be talking about, oh, wow, yes, there is a pride march. Oh, India is going to decriminalize homosexuality. Wow, all of that. But inside the newsrooms, the conversations are still, oh, are these guys going to sit with us now? Are these guys going to be on panels with us now? So these are the conversations that were happening in the places that I was working at before I was even out, right? And this is true of pretty much every marginalized group, in the sense that when I entered the industry, or I see a lot of young women enter the industry, they're there 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then in leadership, it's pretty much all men, right? And it's pretty much, in India, it's all upper caste men who are I mean, it's an old boys club, right? And this has been happening for such a long time, and it just why are we not like sort of focusing on it is a question. So Oxfam and one of the news organizations in India, News Laundry, they did a report to figure out because in India we don't like counting things. We haven't done a census in a very long time. So they started figuring out what is the diversity in newsrooms, and it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. This was 21, 22, and they found out that there were hardly any marginalized caste people in leadership in any of the media organizations across print, television, digital, in the entire country, whoever they reached out to and whoever agreed to even give them the data, right? So this is true across media in India, and therefore the stories that come out are also going to be very superficial. So in terms of queer stories, it's either gore or it's a spectacle, right? Either somebody's dead, or oh my God, they died by suicide, or they were murdered. Oh man, it's either that or oh, look at these peacocks, look at them out on the street during Pride. It's only these stories, nothing else gets covered, and that needs to change. I mean, every person is a human being. I mean, every marginalized person is a human being. So how do we tell those stories better?
Yeah, but it strikes me because traditionally marginalized people are constantly on panels like this trying to advocate for themselves. So is it that newsrooms are seeing inclusion as some kind of charity, or is it just not being internalized properly?
I think, yes, there is a little bit of both, right? So there is a little bit of, the people who do say that I want to be inclusive or I want my team to be diverse, it starts with these guys need jobs as well, right? Or I want to be the first one who has a more diverse newsroom. So that's where it starts. I'm like, okay, if that's where it starts and it moves to a better place, that's fine. If you're going to learn more and it becomes a more inclusive place, like organically, that's better. But it isn't happening at the speed that we want it to. But yeah, I mean, marginalized people are there everywhere, right? And especially queer people, we are in your families. We are there everywhere. We're not going to go anywhere, right? So we're part of every community. We're part of every intersection. Not going to go anywhere. So yeah.
Okay, so Aurel, as somebody who is in comedy, this is an equal opportunity industry, making fun of everyone all the time. What can we learn then from your approach to not single out any one group?
I think probably nothing, because comedy is still like a pretty white male-run business. And it's also the institutions, like in Germany as well, because it's the people in power who want to see people they can identify with, and usually it's, white men, and they see white men, so they promote and support more white men than any other group. So the only thing we can probably learn about comedy is that you just try to disrupt stuff. You can attack people in power, and you can show them their flaws. And the good thing about comedy, and especially in Germany, is you don't need to hide, because you have freedom of speech and everything. So you can go all out on it. It's different, like when you write a hit piece in a newspaper or something, and it's like, just this guy is bad. Then they take it really serious. But sometimes when you do it with comedy, you can be like, you can joke about that person, and people will forgive you and maybe start thinking about it. So yeah, I think that's the only thing. You can use comedy as a way to bring attention to matters.
Yeah, and point at the absurd. But you have said something about dismantling the system. But Claire, you can't do that unless you have a seat at the table. And unfortunately, as we speak, women represent globally just 26% of top newsroom management roles. Why is this still the case?
Oh, I think, it's human nature for people to want to retain the power that they have. And there are a lot of structural issues, obviously, about, taking women just as a group, structural issues in terms of society and support for women going back to work after they've had children. And then, every time you take maternity leave, which we're entitled to in Australia, you're putting your career on hold to do that, and then when you go back, the the structure of your household and the support that you have in your household affects what you can do at work. So, that structure has been built as part of a patriarchy. If we want to have more women in senior management roles in the media and more broadly across society, we have to look at that unit of reproduction, if we're talking in Marxist terms, in the household. How does the household support women to have equal opportunity in their work and in their career as their partner, generally speaking, a man 9 out of 10 times. But there are some, I think that ABC, not wanting to blow our own trumpet or anything, but we actually do have 50% parity of women in senior management roles within the ABC.
How long did it take for you to achieve that?
Look, I think we've probably had that for about the last 7 years or so. It was, it was hard won. There was that project to get women more involved, and in more positions of power in the organisation started back in the 1970s. It wasn't something that's just happened overnight, or it's a slow chipping away of the structures in the organisation, of the way women are supported, of educating the men in the organisation too about how women might participate differently in their work life or, in a meeting and so on. So there's lots of different kind of factors that go into that. But I think looking at the passage of women in an organisation and how you can get up to that parity level provides us really good examples of how you can do that for other groups in society as well.
Which then brings me to my next question, because, okay, you get 50-50 with women. What about the other genders? What about ethnic minorities? How far do you want to distill this question of inclusion?
So Australia is one of the most multicultural nations on earth, and in terms of freedom of expression and freedom of sexuality and so on, we're a very open and relatively inclusive society. So what we need, or what we have within the ABC is targets around the level of gender diversity across the board, across all levels of the organisation, in leadership roles and so on. We're measuring participation, and so what we look at in terms of our targets is to have the same targets internally within the ABC for representation as there are the proportion of people in the different groups in society.
Okay, so Aurel, I have to ask you from like an observer's perspective, because you're creating content, but you're also consuming it. What do you think we're losing by not being inclusive in our work?
Well, different perspectives. I mean, that's something you have in which makes comedy interesting, or which makes content interesting anyway. The more people from different paths of life you have creating content, the more generous your culture gets, the more you can see, the more perspectives you can try to understand and also enjoy. So, is my mic doing something weird? Bang. No?
No, it's...
Because I'm hearing an echo. So, yeah, we're just missing out on different cultures and different perspectives. It would be so boring if you would just hear, for example, just stand up from the same group of people. It would be all the same. And so, yeah, it's really enjoyable to have people from different parts of life doing content.
Yeah, Raga, you want to add something?
I just want to add to that. Yes, it will be very boring, but also you miss, as journalists, the actual story. So just to give you an example, a lot of newspapers had the headline once that a woman kills husband because he was bald.
Huh?
Yeah, literally that was the headline across like a bunch of newspapers. So we have a crime reporter problem. Crime reporters just go to the cops give them something, they just publish it, right? Except the newsroom that I was working in at that point had about 70% women. It was a 70-30. And the reporter who was covering the story was a woman, the editor was a woman, and they were like, this just sounds off, right? Like there's something off about this. So they decided to dig deeper, which just meant like a couple of more phone calls or like, meeting one more person. And they realized that this was a story of marital rape. And, it was just twisted out of context by a bunch of men, and it just became woman murders man because he was bald, and everybody's like sniggering about it. So that's why you need diversity in the newsroom. That's why you need people who understand issues, who understand different perspectives, who have the lens to look at something and say, okay, this doesn't look right, or this doesn't look like the entire picture. So that is why I think diversity is also important, because as a business, you don't want to get your stories wrong.
Yeah, so creating that nuance, but how do we do it on a practical level? I did ask Claire, how far do you want to take this? So in the newsroom, how do you create that inclusivity?
Two things. One, I think affirmative action. In India, we have reservations in the public sector, right?
Affirmative action, the dirty word.
It's a dirty word, yeah. I think it is important. And the second thing is also, even when newsrooms have the right intention, why should marginalized people come and apply to jobs in your organization? Have you created an inclusive newsroom, right? Have you created a newsroom where your
Okay, let's start there. How do you create an inclusive newsroom?
You start bit by bit. For instance, there are lots of organizations that hire trans women in India, and they're like, okay, we are so inclusive because we've hired trans women, but you don't have proper bathrooms. You have one team which has been trained, right? And then there is 5 people who quit, and then the next round of people who come in are not trained on how to behave with other human beings equally, right? Respectfully. So, yeah, I mean, yes. So, in that sense, I think it has to be continuous. You have to have leadership buy-in, and you have to continuously keep working on it and know that you're never going to be perfect, right? You're not going to be perfect. Accept that and start working on it. Start working on it a little by little. And I mean, it's normal, right? As I grow older, I listen to younger people and I'm like, what are you on about, right? I don't understand this. I can say, I don't understand this, you're wrong. Or I don't understand this, let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
So have those continuous conversations, and that's the only way.
So let me ask Claire that same question. Why should we even bother? Because someone might listen to Raga and say, this is just woke nonsense. I don't need to do that for my newsroom. I'll still get my clicks. Is there a business case for this?
There's absolutely a business case for it. You might get your clicks from 50% of society when you could be looking at getting clicks from 100% of society. I mean, it's all about, there is absolutely an economic case, and if you're a public service media like we are, a reach case, because we have that great luxury of not really having to look at the financials behind it. But you're, not inclusive of LGBTQI people within your newsroom and representation of LGBTQI people in your content, well, you're missing 1 out of 10 people. It's the same thing if you're reporting about gender-based violence occurring because of something incredibly superficial, like the man was bald. Well, you're missing 50% of the population, because you might get a click, but you won't get engagement.
Aurel is making a face. What's that?
He is.
No. I just thought it sounds really optimistic to say, well, the clicks matter for us, because I feel like all the newsrooms, they're running around like headless chickens to whatever government we have right now. If we have a right-wing government, then we say, okay, we don't need this woke shit. And then we have a more leftist government, and they'll be back like, yeah, no, we need them, bring them in. And I think change is not possible. Like real change is not possible if people switch their minds every day or every few years or every 2 years. So I'm really pessimistic about it as a comedian. That's probably weird that I'm the pessimistic one in this round. But what do you think you do to have like constant change, or how do you think you can implement that?
That's an interesting question.
It is an interesting question. So I mean, I'm a slight optimist, and if I look at the course of history, certainly in a country like Australia, and I think in a country like Germany as well, and in a lot of Europe, there has been a rights revolution from the Enlightenment up until the current day. Now there are, if you look at respect for human rights and inclusivity and so on, there is a positive gradient in that. Now there are, glitches over time. So, the government changes, etc. Policies change, or leadership changes, and there may be a slight decline. But in general, the trajectory has been upwards. Now, there are obviously a lot of other countries where that has not happened, but I think it's incumbent for us as the public broadcaster in Australia of showing, being an exemplar of how you can actually get better and better at being inclusive in the work that you do, representing all parts of society and making that the norm. That's our job, make that the norm.
Aurel, convinced?
I also want to be optimistic. I think it's it depends on when you say there's a growth in human rights or respect for people and everything. It depends on how big the eras are you look at. Because if I look at a really big picture, it could be this is the wave or this is the wave. So
yeah. So let me bring us back a little bit to, some kind of solutions here, because we all know what the problem is. Storytelling in innovative formats can certainly be one of those things. Aurel, in comedy, there seem to be no rules as to how to engage with the public, how to connect with them. Anything we could learn? Best practice examples?
Yeah, be creative. I think that's the fun part.
What are you trying to say? We're not currently creative?
We are creative, and we're having a conversation which is actually really creative because it's always a new one.
Yeah.
And enjoyable. When I started my career in media, I studied journalism and communications science and thought about becoming a journalist. And then I figured out that, first of all, my life is way more fun if I do comedy. And I still joke about the stuff you guys report on, and it makes it really enjoyable for me. It's because I can talk about those topics which are important to me, but in a really, creative way. And I think also in news and everything, we just have to be creative in how we serve it, how we get it to the people. In creative writing, have great writing, great reporting. So I think, it's all we have. Creativity is all we have. So.
Yeah, so Raga, should we also lean into these digital formats, which on the internet, there's all varieties of human beings, and perhaps that's where we should begin?
Probably, but also there are people outside of the internet as well, right? I think for us, what's worked is with InQlusive Newsrooms, we've created guides in 6 languages with glossaries of terms that queer people use for themselves. And we've actually worked with the people. It's not like, some linguist has sat and invented terms, but we worked with the communities on what words they use for themselves. So working with communities that you want to represent is, I think, very important. I think I have a QR code in case you guys want to download the guide and check it out. Just want to go back to the business case question. Mm-hmm. The thing is, let's say there is research and that says, there is no business case for diversity and inclusion. Does that mean we should not do it, right? I think we've gone quite far from looking at journalism as a public good and therefore doing the right thing. And I think we need to sort of stick to that. We need to sort of, as a society, understand that not everything is about profit. Not everything needs to be about business. And some things are just the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm not a business head, right? I don't have money in the business, but I think of journalism as a public good. As a journalist, I think of it like that.
Are we allowed to clap?
What do we do to reintroduce, it actually sounds crazy for me to say reintroduce humanity into journalism.
It's a society-wide problem. It's not a journalism problem, right? Everywhere, we're just looking at everything and, oh, you're so woke. Why is it, why do we think being humans and having humanity is bad, right? And that seems to be the trend with sort of right-wing governments coming everywhere across the world. And we just need to fight that. As a society, we need to fight that. And as journalists, we need to understand, go back to 5 W's in one H, right? Like, let's stick to facts and let's stick to our ethics and let the business people worry about the business, right? Let journalists worry about the stories. Reporters are supposed to fight with their editors for their stories. Let's go back to doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I think, that's what I would.
Okay,
Yeah.
before I introduce the audience for their questions, Claire, I do have to ask what the role of technology could be in creating more inclusive spaces, because there are over 6,500 languages that are spoken worldwide. This is according to UNESCO, but approximately 90% of online content is available in only 10 languages.
Well, there's an enormous opportunity there, I guess, with artificial intelligence and machine learning to create models of AI models for translation. So, that's I think that's a great opportunity. At the moment, I don't know that, you'd have to have a media organization or an AI machine learning creator who is going to concentrate on those more or less spoken languages, not spoken by so many people. But I think that's a real opportunity for us. I think also the fact that there's a lot of potential harm in the internet and on the in social media as well, but that also digital democratization, increasing people's digital access does present an opportunity as well. So what we all really need to do is make sure that technology in our respective jurisdictions is being applied and operated in a way where it's controlled and properly regulated to enable social good to occur, as opposed to enable the proliferation of misinformation and disinformation. And there's a word I use, you'll excuse the language, but so that we don't end up with an enshittified internet.
Shittified is what you were worried about? Did you not hear Carol yesterday? All right, so I'll now open the floor for some questions. I've got one here, another one here, one on the other side. Please tell us who you are and where you're from before you ask your question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Daniel Feher. I'm from Hungary. I live in Berlin. And thanks you for this very, very insightful discussion. I was very happy that Claire, after you all described it, a little named the elephant in the room, which is for me patriarchy. And I would have so far described patriarchy as this old, powerful, white cis man defending their privileges. But we have also this phenomenon, which I think we've seen in different crisis hurts already in the past decades, but now in US politics, you mentioned it became very apparent that they are joined by angry young men. And they put their forces together. What I wondered, would it be possible to deal with this phenomenon by also giving these angry young men, who are usually also from the lower scale of wealth and education, would it be a possibility to give them also a representation with the instruments that actually now this regime is fighting against, instead of letting the old white cis men pretending that they speak for them?
Okay, I'd just like to let the audience know that someone behind you, I won't point out who it was really rolling your eyes when you asked that question. So it's already rubbed people the wrong way. But it's an important one, what to do with the ones who are currently feeling disenfranchised, Claire.
Angry young men?
Yes, the angry young men.
Wow, okay.
Is it even fair to ask?
Oh, look, I think it's an interesting question, and what at the heart of what your question is do we give airtime, do we give voice to people who are effectively doing hate speech, for example, or who are, it's kind of the eye of the beholder, right? If you're a female and you're listening to a young angry man who's a complete misogynist, that's hate speech to me. Well, at times it may be appropriate, but we have to be really, really careful about it because we don't want to platform views unnecessarily, but how are you going to critique that kind of speech if you don't allow your audiences, or you're not repeating that in some way in your content? Now, would you have a young angry man who's extremely misogynistic on a panel discussion and then allowing audiences to do Q&A? Maybe you wouldn't, because that would be very, that could be a quite dangerous way of presenting those views. But there are other ways of doing it. And I think those views absolutely need to be addressed and critiqued.
Also, do you know podcasts? There's a lot of them.
Okay, so they're represented there. All right, we had another question from you. Yes. Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Catherine. I'm a graduate student of global communication, but I also used to be a journalist back in the Philippines. And based on my experience as a young journalist back home, I've received some call-outs on the internet about the way I report or the facts that I share online about my news reports. And it's usually coming from people who are older than me. So I want to understand, like, in your based on your experiences, is there a way to bridge this generational gap inside the newsrooms so we, us young journalists, could also get the trust of our editors and also our audiences that are coming from different generations?
Despite Aurel not being a journalist, I'd like him to try and tackle this one. How do we bridge this generational divide? Because I'm sure it exists in comedy as well. How are you taken seriously?
Yeah, definitely. It is complicated. I think it starts a little bit because, like, I work a lot with German public TV stations, and usually you work with people who are older than you, like who are like working on your shows, and it's just really important to get their perspectives in as well. But I think for every generation, I mean, there's some stuff that Gen Z does I don't understand anymore. I mean, I understand, but it's not my...
Wait, you're not Gen Z?
No, I'm not Gen Z. So sometimes I even feel old, but I think not to sound wise or something, but I think I expect the older generations to go with the flow and to be up to date and to try to understand that things are different for the next generation. And I think with conversations, like you have to talk about it.
All right.
You have to explain yourself and hope they will understand, and then in the end we're back to the clicks, huh?
I know you want to add, but please allow me to not let you do that so that we can have one more question.
Yeah.
There's someone who had, but we'll take your question.
Milica Pešić, Media Diversity Institute, London. I have questions for each of you, but I don't think it's fair to bother the audience. So for Aurel, you're a comedian and journalist, and as we...
Not a journalist.
Sorry?
I wouldn't, please, not a journalist.
Okay, but
I do political
like
comedy.
presenter or something?
Yeah,
okay.
Host YouTube shows.
We know that entertainment works better when we talk about diversity.
Yes.
But we also know that humor is very often based on negative stereotypes about different ethnic, religious groups, women, gender, and so on and so on. How do you deal with this? Do you feel any kind of responsibility for spreading negative stereotypes? That's a question for you. A question for Ragamalika.
Sorry, I'll just allow you one question, please.
Okay, sorry.
Aurel.
Okay.
First,
I usually try not to do that. That's actually my kind of job, because I do a lot of political comedy, and I'm just trying to always kick up and don't kick down. So I'm not trying to attack any minorities. I try to attack politicians. In power.
And in your defense, Aurel, the Pew Research in 2022 said that 35% of young adults aged between 18 and 29 actually preferred news that was delivered with humor because it significantly improved their news consumption and retention. One more question, please. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Diana Pastor. I am Maya Quiche from Guatemala, and I work for Cultural Survival, an organization that produces lots of content and news for indigenous peoples. We also distribute community radio stations and other community organizations content. And you said, my question is for Ragamalika, and you said something very interesting, like journalism is not about profit, it's not everything about business. And I will add something else. It's not just about speed, because I feel like many newsrooms are so worried to be the first ones that they forget to take a time to include other people. And I'm going to give quickly 3 examples. So the first one would be, I've seen, for example, in newsrooms that just put some pictures of random people when they want to portray indigenous peoples, whether they belong to a specific group or not. But probably it's just because they want to be the first ones to give the news. Second, it's because maybe they don't hire some minorities because it would take more time for them to explain, because minorities usually have less opportunities. And finally, I think they might not have the contact with the minorities, for example, to have like accurate information. So what would be your advice for for journalists to be more inclusive with indigenous Black people, and also like to balance to be the first ones?
I call it dialogue. So journalists have, in every city, they'll have that one LGBTQ activist who's been the same voice quoted in the media for the last 20 years, and they know that this person is going to pick up the call by the time the boss wants the story, and they're going to give you the exact 20-word bite that you need to put in, right? I think journalists really need to start looking for more voices. You start building, you have to engage with communities. You can't be writing about communities unless you're engaged with them, which also means engaging with what politics is happening inside those communities. And I say communities because none of these communities are sort of monoliths, right? We can't say LGBTQIA plus community in India. No, this is lots of people, different identities, different castes, different religions, different languages, different ages, right? All of these things matters. We have to, I think, as journalists, do our jobs better. And I've been in television, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I was an output editor, so I remember there have been many times where, somebody would yell, break it, right? And I'm like, okay, I'm breaking it. So there's a sting, breaking news. And I'm telling the anchor it's breaking news. I don't know what the breaking news is. Right? So I'm like, it's breaking news. The anchor is like, breaking news coming in. We have breaking news coming in. Breaking news. It's very important news. By which time somebody would tell you what it is. And I think it's ridiculous. I don't do any breaking news anymore. And it's really ridiculous. I think we should step back, look at our roles and, take ourselves more seriously and, do our jobs properly and not, sort of dialogue in. That's what yeah.
That's an excellent place to end this conversation. Step back, take a moment, and take everyone seriously and do our job. Ragamalika, Karthikeyan, Claire Gorman, Aurel Mertz, thank you so much for your insights, and thank you all for your company.